So, hello guys, my name is Serg Hospodarets and I'm a front-end lead developer from Dublin in Ireland. And I love new technologies, browsers, front-end, and especially CSS. And my talk is, you might not need a CSS preprocessor. To answer this question, we have to recollect the history. So what was before the CSS? 90s. So what was in 90s? 90s was an era of plain HTML with attributes and table markup, so it was mess of everything. And sites like Space Jam used the top of technologies that time. And in 1996, the community actually tired and decided it's enough to mix the document content and its presentation. Exactly for this, CSS was invented. So it's designed to provide styles for fonts, colors, layout, everything, and mostly to separate things. But CSS had own problems. Let's count them. It's absence of variables, absence of mixins, leakage of modularity, nested rules, and code duplication as a result of all this. So sometimes we think about CSS like that. Preprocessors. Preprocessors were invented as a silver bullet to solve all these problems. And the gold trio is Sass, Less, and Stylus. They gave us much more power on how we develop our sites today. So let's take a look which actually problems were solved by them. But speaking about preprocessors in my presentation, I would mostly I would use Sass because it's very popular and the syntax is well known. So variables and operators. What do we have in preprocessors? You can assign a variable and then use it or make some operations with it. Handy. The same with mixins. You just aggregating a bunch of properties, put them in some common place, and then just use. So as only you change this in a common place, it changes it everywhere. And nesting. Nesting is an answer how to reflect your HTML structure in CSS, which actually makes our development easier as well. Modules. You cannot imagine the modern project without modules. You cannot put everything in one file. You want to separate concerns and put header styles in one file, navigation styles in another file, and make the changes separately there. So the preprocessors gave us these modules, which you can put then in one file if you want. So fine, preprocessor gave us much more additional things. And now we use the gold trio. It's Stylus, Sass, and Less. postCSS, which is actually a post-processor, is much more popular today, and Mies and others, exotic, we also can use. But we live not in a perfect world, and preprocessors have own problems. And let's see what it is. Additional setup. Doesn't matter which preprocessor you start actually using. You have to provide additional setup, something like that or anything. Even if you provided this setup, you made everything correctly, you changed your build, any your change to your styles or anything requires recompilation. And this compilation takes time, your time. Every day, we're actually waiting for these builds. Another big problem, and maybe the biggest problem of preprocessors, every time you have to learn a new syntax. So let's take a look to actually two, the most popular of them, Sass and Less. In Sass, you use $, in Less, add for variables. For mixins, it's also different syntax. It, again, takes our time just to learn new syntax, so it's not standardized, and it's not acceptable. Even if you did everything properly, you did setup, you waited for the time of recompilation, you actually did provided source maps, you again might have problems. So here, in my example, I'm just trying to find from where actually the styles came in my source code. And browser showed me absolutely something different. So the bug might be buggy, which we cannot approve these days. Let's summarize. What we want? Variables, mixins, nesting, also modularity, and some handy things like selectors, helpers, selector helpers, and color functions. What we don't want? Additional setup, compilation, they all take time, and non-standardized syntax, and of course this hard debug. So, does CSS have all these things today? And to answer this question, we'll see the next slides. What we wanted? Variables. Let's recollect in CSS, do we have variables already in old CSS things? Current color. If you don't know, if you have some text color inherited, it's actually a variable, current color. So you can say that browser will interpret this as a red. So it's a first CSS variable, honestly. The same with yam and rem. They are for font size, but they are relative, but also kind of variables. But it's not something what we want. We want real variables, like in JavaScript, other languages. So for that, in CSS, it was provided CSS custom properties. And you will see on next slides why the name is custom properties, because it exactly explains their purpose. They're also known as CSS variables. And surprise, it's already supported in most of browsers for 1 year, except actually one, Edge. But I have a good news for you guys. They started working on this on their support. As you see, as only many people voted for this, Microsoft guys just started working, which is nice. So let's say in couple months, it will be everywhere. And you can use this across the browsers without any builds, without anything, so natively. Cool. And let's take a look to their syntax. So you're just declaring a variable, you're using a variable, so providing some value. Using variable you can do with var function, so just provide the name inside. And here's an example. If you provide a custom property main color, just use this after. So why it's custom property? Because instead of color, you're saying something to main color. And it's cascading the same way. It works as any other CSS property. So here, how you can use this. And the problem, you might be surprised, why the syntax is so ugly? This double dashes, for why? What is the purpose? Why not dollar or something else? But there is a big reason for this. After that, you can actually use CSS variables inside your preprocessors, and you can mix them both if you want, which is cool, so your preprocessor will not touch CSS variables. And the answer, what I can put inside the variable, is easy. Anything. Anything, what is the correct CSS value, just put it there. So it might be colors, like here. It might be layouts, things, even strings, and even functions like calc. Here is a strange long value, which is an expression. I am not sure how you will work with this in CSS, how you'll use this, but you can pass this in JavaScript and reuse it there. I will show you later how to do this. Cool. And what about handy things? In many languages, you have something like, OK, I'm not sure if my variable is defined. If it's not defined, let's use some default value. And it's easy. Just provide a second argument to this var function. You see, comma, and the default value. And it works. So here, let's take a look to the first example. If p margin is defined, OK, its value, the first value is used. If it's not defined, your default one actually goes and is preceded by browser. Cool. And reassigning from other variables. No problem. As other CSS properties, you can just use them. See, here I even concatenating the properties, and I have a long string here as a result. Block highlight text, which is here. And even more, if it's CSS custom property, if it's CSS property actually, you can use initial and inherit value as for any other CSS properties. So initial will reset the value of your variable for the scope, and the same for inherit, it will inherit it. So if you understand how CSS properties work, you already understand how this works, how CSS variables work. And I use each example. The name is custom CSS property. So let's provide example exactly for this. We don't have box shadow color still in our CSS. But for hover, let's say we want to, when you actually move our cursor on element, we want to show a different color. And we want to not to provide test hover and box shadow long value with this, the same actual values except the color. I want to change only the color. So here I'm providing a custom CSS property box shadow color and changing only that. And it works. So custom CSS properties, everything is in this name. Cool. Scopes. we already touched the idea of scope, so how it works. As in JavaScript, you know that you cannot go in internal scope, but you could use from everything from external. The idea is kind of the same. If you understand how CSS properties are cascading, how they work, you already know how the scopes work for these variables. So let's take a look to this example. Root. Root in HTML, it's a global element. Usually it's just HTML. So it's global variable. If you provide this global variable, it's available everywhere, as expected. So the same as in preprocessor, there are global variables. Then for block, you see here is block and block. We provide in another variable. For these elements, you can use both global variable and block variable. And for block highlight, I'm providing the third one. As only we have the third one, we can use both global, block var, and third one, which is actually here. And it works. So this is the idea of scopes. As you might expect, CSS and preprocessor scopes, they are different. And the reason is simple. In your preprocessor doesn't know anything about your DOM structure. And if you provided global variable and applied something for the block, block highlight doesn't know anything about this. It's from this example, you see? So they will have the same font size. Everything is different in CSS. As only you provided a global variable, here for root scope, and applied something for block, we see here is the same class, block and block highlight. And this redeclaration will take effect here, so it will be bigger. So it's a bit different because CSS works in your browser without any compilation, and it knows everything about your current DOM. Cool. And what can be a good example of scopes? So scope examples might be, OK, I want to make a value of some variable different for mobile screens or something like this. Just wrap it in media query. And this is an example of scope. As only this is math, yep, the value is like that. It's a red. If you want to provide something, OK, when I'm hovering or link has some state, like active, just change, apply the value in a little bit different. It's also an example of this scope. And let me show you how it works. So this demo will show you also that variables are alive in your browsers. Here is a demo. Better to show you source code. Oops. I'm just saying, OK, there is a global variable screen category desktop. And if I remove all this, here, it just shows that screen category is desktop. A good tip for you, how to debug CSS variables. Everything is in your browser. You don't have any SCSS, you don't have any less or anything, no preprocessor. So just provide this value in CSS-generated content. Just say, OK, CSS, just show me in the browser the value of current variable. Without any magic, it just works. And let's put my code back. And I'm saying, for smaller screens, apply a tablet. Even for smaller, less than 640 pixels, say that it's phone. Let's take a look how it works. So it's phone, because it's small, then it's tablet, and then it's desktop. So you see, it's kind of logic without anything, and it's alive in your browser. So they are alive. As only I'm changing something like phone to phone 1, you see, it's applied immediately. You don't need to spend time waiting for build or anything like that. Cool. And I mentioned about operators and calculations. So what you have to do if you want to, you have some variable with font size, and you want to have a little bit bigger font size. So let's take a look if we do something like this. Multiply to 1 and 5. But let's assume we are CSS. So we're asking, OK, 1 rem multiplied to 1 and 5. I don't understand what you want from me. I don't understand how it's supposed to work. So what we have to do? Any ideas? Calc. Calc in CSS, this function was introduced exactly to say, hi, browser, actually, I want you to calculate this value and apply it immediately. As only something changed in this value, just reapply it. So if we change the value of the variable, it would be recalculated immediately. So CSS already has everything what we need for operators there. And the demo. As a good demo for that, I prepared the demo with colors. So here we have 3 sliders, R, G, and B. What does it do? They do actually changing global variables value. Here, RGB. When I'm dragging the slider, the value is changed from 0 to 255. So you see where I'm going, correct? I'm just generated new colors, RGB. So here, let's take a look. This background is generated using my RGB variables. Here I'm saying background color, just variable R, variable G, variable B, and opacity 1. Yep, and here is the color which represents the current position of my sliders. Here, we know how to generate a grayscale color from any of them. So just knowing the formula, kind of like, give me 20% of R, 70% of G, and 7% of B, it would be the grayscale. The same for invert, 255 minus. But if you want to go a bit crazy and to provide something like sepia, of course, it's not Instagram filters, but you still can apply a lot of calculations, and as a result, it works in your browser. As you see, it's long formula with some crazy operators, but it works immediately. The performance of all this is quite nice. All browsers provided good solutions to make it work immediately without any problems. So here, how good, and you can go with calc and with CSS variables even further. It's just an example. Super, I promised you just to show how to work with this from JavaScript. If you have media breakpoints, like font, tablet, you can, of course, duplicate them in CSS and in JavaScript, but it's not a good way. I want to have them in one place. So why not in CSS? You just provided this in CSS, and what you had to do when we didn't have these CSS variables. You provided some JSON string using your preprocessor, and then read this string from JavaScript and tried to parse, which is crazy, which absolutely strange idea. But with with CSS variables, custom properties, you're providing, okay, here is breakpoint data. It's font, size, and the same media query for tablet. From JavaScript, everything you have to do, just use this API, get property value, and just read it. Handy, isn't it? And the same, you can not only read, you can actually assign CSS from JavaScript. So here is a demo. It's extended the one from previous example. We're not just changing depending on the size, the variable, but also reading this from JavaScript, which is tablet is the current state, and assign to custom to. So as you see, value will be changed here, custom to. So you have all the power, CSS, JavaScript, everything. You can work with this. Of course, if you work in CSS and JavaScript with all these things, we want to understand if it's really supported in the current browser. So for that, just use add supports in CSS. In JavaScript, there is also API like css.supports. And handy examples, like if you want to make your project work for both browsers which support and which don't support, just create two variables of your CSS file, with and without custom properties. And if it's not supported, just load another one. I'm doing this on my side. Why else? If you're not absolutely sure they are live, I showed you many good examples why they are better than something in preprocessors, I mean CSS variables. I will show you something where is the example what you cannot do with preprocessor. You can do only with CSS variables. So at some point in any project, we want to generate some color schema. OK, it was white one. We want dark one or pink, something like that. So what you usually do with preprocessors. With preprocessors, you go in and creating additional. So this is the most stupid way. You creating an additional CSS, the copy of your one, and providing styles there. So just copy of plain your CSS. Another way, just to create styles only for pin schema. And your browser should actually load these additional styles. What you have to do with CSS? The good way is just to create, OK, color variables like main color, main background, anything else, and just change only this value. So just you say in browser, just apply my values. Don't do anything else. And I'm doing this, loading another file here. Pink set just changes these colors. You can do this anyway. You can just apply some values in a different way. As you see, it works in your browser and it's alive. So cool. You cannot do this with preprocessors. What was the next? Mixins. So now we have variables. Next one was mixins. What about mixins? It's CSS custom sets of properties. And let's take a look why the name is, again, something strange, not CSS mixin. So custom property. We already saw that you just assign a variable using this syntax. What if we just put not a value there, but some declaration of style, like property 1, value 1, property 2, value 2, like this? Not bad idea. It already looks like a mixin. If you just use something like apply, it works. It works, and it's exactly what is in CSS now. So just use this apply, and instead of value, provide declaration of styles. And reasons to use are quite clear. So just avoid code duplication, have this in central place, everything I told you before. And if you already understood how CSS variables work, how to use them from JavaScript, how the scopes work, cascading, you know everything about CSS mixins. It's the same, but instead of value, you're providing declaration of styles. So that's why custom property sets. And here is the example how you provide the king of mixins. It's clearfix. So you're just saying, OK, I have a clearfix mixin with some my properties, and I'm applying this as only I have problems with collapsing somewhere when I'm using float. So this is actually a working example. The same to having these 3 dots. That's it. And a demo. The very popular technique is just to draw triangles using CSS. Let's take a look how it might work. I'm saying, here is my triangle to bottom. Here it is. And apply triangle to bottom mixin, which actually will draw this triangle. So knowing the correct order of borders inside the mixin, you see browser just goes and reads this. So I'm saying apply mixin. What does browser do? It goes to this declaration and inlines all the styles from mixin here. It's everything what it does. And let's take a look at actually, so first of all, it works in Chrome. And I'm changing, let's say, width. It's bigger. It's applied immediately. So both CSS variables and mixins work in this example. Then I'm changing a color, pink one. Cool, it works. And even more, I can just change from the triangle to bottom to triangle to top. Immediately, it works. You don't spend any time waiting for compilations of anything like this. Nice. And having all this goodness, which I told you, of course, there are some small things which should be changed. For example, I just tricked you. As you saw, I changed variable which was used before the mixin declaration. But if I provide this close to a place where I'm just actually applying that, it will not work. So it means that you cannot pass variables inside CSS mixins, which is wrong. And currently there are discussions how to change this behavior, and hopefully in a couple months it would be solved. So just know that currently there is no support for such things. And do you know why actually one of the most biggest reasons why mixins were provided? Vendor prefixes. Surprisingly, because today we have auto prefixer. Auto prefixer solves all our problems. We don't care about browser prefixes like WebKit or Moz or anything else today. But can we still use CSS mixins for that? Thanks to Leo Variodia, if you use blank like that and you change clip path to anything else, yes, you can do this, but not with CSS mixins, but CSS custom properties, which might surprise you a bit, but it works. Then the usage is like that. You're just saying, OK, clip path or any other value, and just provide like this. Browser will do everything for you. So you can. Next was nesting. So nesting, again, it's just how you represent HTML in your CSS. And what we wanted to avoid using nesting. We don't want 4 times just to see this table, color table. So just code duplication and bad readability. We cannot understand what is going on here. So can you give me a better example? So there is a proposal how this syntax might work in browser. So it's the same way as in preprocessors. This code is actually perfectly works in Sass. So it's the same. You don't need to change anything in your code. Just change it from CSS to CSS, and that's it. It will be applied. And nesting a rule. In the huge projects, you have complex cases. Like, OK, you're saying, here isn't I'm sending some Ajax request, I'm sorry, and I want to apply some half opacity to show on UI for user, OK, something is changing. And for that, inside your nesting, you just apply something like this, which is interpreted by browser like, okay, when there is a global class loading, just make some half opacity. So just use add nest for complex cases. And migration. What about the migration for nesting? The answer is, again, easier. Just you don't need to do anything. Just leave the code and apply this in browser when it's supported. That's it. Now we are happy how we write the code because we have variables, mixins, nesting. But how we separate, how we actually structure this, how we provide modules. And here is another surprise: the add import CSS rule is actually in most browsers already for 10 years, since IE 5.5. Let's take a look how it works and then try to understand why we still don't use them. How it works: if you have an external CSS, here's code, here's what browser does. And you have inside CSS import 1.css, import 2, the same as actually ES6 modules. You already know how it works. Browser does exactly what we expect. It sends requests to load these files and inlines them. So it would be import 1, 2, 3 CSS and other style if they are there. So everything works exactly as we expected. But why? Why we didn't use this before? So bugs. If you had in old browsers something like import 1, 2, 3, browser could include like 3, 2, 1, which broke all the idea. And the same was that this request was sent one after another, which took a lot of time. Currently, all these problems are fixed in all modern browsers, so just use this without thinking. And it has additional advantages. You can say for responsive, it's a very good solution. You can say, OK, if it's not small screen, just don't do anything. If it's small screen, smaller than 728, just load an additional CSS, where you just change something for your responsive site on mobile. And that's it. You have just having this for free from its syntax. Cool. So let's summarize. Again, variables, mixins, nesting modules. We have this. Select all helpers and color functions, something what we also wanted. The syntax of the next things of the selectors and these color functions is self-explanatory, so I will just provide small comments here. So here, take a look to this code. What is going on here? I don't know, actually. But let's take a look to this one. You're saying this pseudo class matches, and it's clear enough. When your navigation has class slide or top, and links inside that have hover or focus states, just apply some color. Before you had to use something like this. Use it. Another example is custom selector. If you don't want to use pseudo classes, just use custom selectors. In HTML5, we have about 15 different input types. And let's say we want to apply some color styles for their disabled state, when they have class disabled or disabled attribute. Before you had to provide about 30 rules. Here, I like this. And here I just use the text input custom selector. You just put all the inputs here using this add custom selector syntax, and that's it. Browser does all the magic for you. And of course, color functions. Colors are everywhere. We use them huge in web today. Sometimes they are part of some common palette. Sometimes they are generated one from another. And for that, it was invented color function. How it works? You're saying, OK, here is a color function, and here is my color. Just change a bit this color, like here. Give me a little bit more black color, something what we do in preprocessors. And we want to do the same in CSS. And these adjusters, you're just doing anything there. So enough to speak. Sometimes a demo worth 1,000 of words. So I'll just let a video play. Here, as I said, you just use these adjusters, and they can be piped. Apply it one after another. Also, there are lightness and blackness adjusters, just to generate, let's say, hover or active states or something other. And you can even blend colors, which is kind of magic. Whoop. Cool. But And sorry, the last but not least for today, it's media queries. We love how they work, media queries, but their syntax is still ugly. You have to copy-paste a lot of code. And everything what we want from them, actually set of breakpoints and way to reuse them. And here, what we can use from new specifications. Just apply add custom media and provide tablet. If you use it Sass mixin like breakpoint, you did the same. You know how it works. You're just saying, OK, here is my tablet, smaller than actually 1024 and bigger than this size, and then just apply this. Apply that like add media minus tablet. It looks like the syntax is from CSS custom properties, and it's already known for you from previous slides. So just do this instead of copy-pasting all this code for media queries. And the biggest problem for developers is like, OK, when it's smaller or bigger size, do I have to use min width or max width? Just let's do something what is in our head. More or less, that's it. It's also included in new specifications. The main question for today is, can we use all this today? Let's take a look. So I already showed that CSS variables are supported in mostly all the browsers except Edge, but they work on this. CSS mixins work in Chrome Canary. I also showed you how it works. Some other specs I applied in different browsers, but sometimes it's beta or dev versions. So should we wait for another couple years? Nope. Polyfills. We have polyfills. One of the most popular are CSS Next. It supports everything what I showed you today. Custom selectors, nesting, media queries, ranges, everything. And with some limitations, of course, but it works. Today you don't have to wait another time. It is postCSS based, and if you already use autoprefixer for handiness, you just include in this module postCSS CSS Next and change autoprefixer to this one. So build change is only one line because CSS Next includes autoprefixer, and you have this for free until it's supported in all the browsers. So how to migrate? If you have a preprocessor, just add this postCSS and CSS Next plugin. After that, you have ability to use all these features. If you want to go further, just change all these variables, mixins, media queries, everything to CSS ones, and then disable a preprocessor. After that, you have only postCSS and all these CSS features. If you disable even postCSS or CSS Next, of course, you want to wait until it's supported in browsers. As only it's supported in browsers, you just remove this. You just learned only once the standardized syntax, and it works without compilation, without anything. This is the migration. And what should I use today? This is another question what I have to answer. Preprocessor or CSS? From everything what I did, from all my experience till today, I would say for now, just mix both of them. Just use CSS goodness inside your preprocessor and take the best parts of both. And what about any live examples of switched sites? As an example, I can show you my site. I just switched to use real custom variables, CSS variables in my site. I apply, for the browsers which don't support this, I apply a different style of CSS without them. And here you see, I'm just changing how many buttons should be shown here. It's a variable, and this logic is applied immediately in the browser. So you can just take a look there. The same, I'm changing some widths, some layout variables here. Cool. So conclusions. Today we have, and I showed you, we have everything what we mostly wanted from preprocessors. Variables, modules, mixins, nesting, and handy things like complex selectors and color functions. And we have polyfills to make it work today. And even real examples of the migrated applications. So we are ready to make the journey. And how you can help or stay tuned. Just subscribe to drafts or spec proposals, or even subscribe to CSS Working Group mailing list or CSS Next issues. Of course, you also can follow me on Twitter. It's everything I wanted to talk about today. Thank you very much, guys.